I believe that in that work of going to the hard place where what you loved was lost and where the way that you knew Christ in that place before feels shattered, that Jesus can encounter you there and that can actually become a holy place of encounter in life with Him.
Welcome to the Living Wholehearted podcast, where we help you lead with integrity at home, at work, and in the community.
I'm Tara Matson, a licensed marriage and family therapist and executive coach.
And I'm Jeff Matson, an executive coach and organizational development professional.
And together we bring you 2 decades of experience in leader development and trauma-informed therapy. We are so glad you're here to help you become the leader you would follow. Well, welcome back to the Living Wholehearted podcast. We're your hosts, Jeff and Tara, and we actually are in the middle of a church hurt series, actually healing from church hurts. And we've been bringing special guests along the way to have a conversation. And today we have a friend, Josh Butler, with us and his own personal journey and healing through church hurts, as well as understanding how God is on your side, no matter where you are in the journey. And we're so excited for you to get to meet Josh today.
Yeah, Joshua Ryan Butler, a familiar friend to Living Wholehearted and to many of you that are listening. He's a teaching pastor with the Willamette family of churches in the Portland area. He's the author of 5 books, including his latest, which is so great, God is on Your Side. Butler, Josh Butler, and his wife, Holly, along with their 3 kiddos, they enjoy spending time with friends over good meals and exploring all the beauty in the Pacific Northwest, just like we like to do. Josh, it is really great to have you on the podcast today. Welcome.
Hey, thank you so much, Tara, Jeff. You guys, it's awesome to see you again and get to, I always love talking with you.
Well, before we dive into like all the harder side of things,
Sure.
What's been your favorite part of the Pacific Northwest, Oregon specifically, but this last year as you've been venturing with your family? Have you done anything unique or special?
Definitely. You know, one of the favorite things was hiking Mount Hood. Did kind of a 4-day backpacking trip with some close friends in the summer. And, you know, I've grown up kind of in the shadow of Mount Hood. So I've always seen it. You know, it's just majestic. It's big. And I've been up there, you know, the lodge and skiing and that kind of thing. But I had never hiked around it, you know, so 4 days backpacking and just seeing the beauty up close and how the diversity, even like, I mean, you're going through at some parts you're crossing rivers and there's forests and other parts there's deserts and there's glaciers and just it's kind of stunning, jaw-dropping, awe-inspiring. And so that was really amazing. So it was kind of something I've always seen Mount Hood, but seeing it up close for 4 days just in depth was phenomenal.
Oh, I'm jealous.
Yeah, man.
Let's put that on our
It
list.
seems like a rite of passage for every Oregonian. I
Yeah.
mean, some sort of connection, up close and personal to the beautiful mountain. That's amazing, Josh.
Yeah, so good. Okay, so your most recent book, God is on Your Side, you walk through various parts of your story. And so we can't go in the depths of each part of those stories, but I would love for you to give us the arc of some of these really key points to what, you know, really caused you to write this book. But everything from blindness to depression to church hurts to your daughter's 5-year-old crisis that you went through. So tell us a little bit about the backdrop of what drove you to write this book.
Definitely. Because, yeah, that question, like, and is God on my side? Is God really for me? I found in my own life, like, it's easy to answer yes when life is going well, but it can be harder when things kind of hit the fan, you know? And for me, there were a number of seasons where I found myself grappling with that question. As you mentioned, there was when our 5-year-old daughter, we spent 10 days in the hospital and 6 months with specialists, and we thought we had lost the girl that we knew forever, you know, and just grappling with God, where are you? What is going on in this season? You know, a while back, I went blind in my right eye, and the doctors were concerned that I was going to be going blind in my left eye too that next year. So they said, hey, you need to brace yourself. And thankfully, it didn't end up going that way. But for a year, I found myself bracing for losing my vision with just all of the fears of, oh my gosh, what if I can't see my kids' faces growing up? What if I can't read and write the way that I know how, or even doing kind of my job the way that I know how? And God, where are you? Are you really in it with me? Are you really for me right now? And most recently, kind of the more recent backdrop to this book, we went through a really we were part of a large church. It was 10 congregations, but one church. And it all ended up kind of dismantling in the aftermath of just, a lot of people know, kind of the reality today for churches across the country with polarization and just some of the ways that churches are fracturing. But it was a really painful, difficult season of seeing our church dismantle into 10 separate churches. And I was the co-lead of one of those 10 congregations. And it's a long, complicated story, but the short version is it was a really painful season for me and our family, and ended up a lot of layers of loss and unraveling with just community, even moving back home to Oregon, where we're from. And for the first time in my life, and kind of the aftermath, I wrestled with some suicidal thoughts, and just deep depression, anxiety, like a few months where it was hard to get out of bed, and really kind of a dark night of the soul season. And that was sort of the backdrop for uh, this most recent. So that was about 2.5 to 3, about probably 3 years ago when this podcast comes out. I um, and I went to a place that I love to go, which is the Gospel of John, in those seasons where I just love is John's picture of Jesus. It's just so clear, these one-on-one encounters with
Mm.
Jesus. And I found myself like within these stories, not just reading about them as like abstract, distant, but I think that's part of John's point in the way he writes. He wants you to see yourself in these one-on-one encounters, that you would actually see Jesus seeing you. And yeah, and in that, I think that's where we really discover the God who is so for us, who is on our side. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah.
Josh, can you give us an example of like one of those scenes that you put yourself into, or two, it gripped you, it touched you in such a way that was like, you encountered God. I mean, you're a pastor, and you encountered God in a more powerful way than maybe you ever even dreamed.
Mm. Definitely. Well, maybe even kind of out of the gate to explain to that phrase, God being on your side, how I'm using that. I love John's gospel right out of the gate. He describes Jesus as the Word made flesh, which means he's the creator who's entered onto your side of creation to be in it with you. It means he calls him the Lamb who takes away the sin of the world, meaning that Jesus is the innocent one who steps onto your side as the guilty to fight for you at the cross. And he calls him the ladder that's connecting heaven and earth, meaning he is the ascended one who's out to bring his side of heaven to your side of earth, like in you and through you in your life. And so right out of the gate, John's just going, man, this is the God who is in it with you. He's fighting for you. He wants to work in you and through you for your good. And so I'm not saying per se that like, man, I'm not saying that God endorses everything you do, or that he picks your sides in any argument or whatever, but just that God is for you more than you could ask or imagine. And it's in Christ that we encounter that. And there's so many of the stories, but maybe one that comes to mind right now that I found myself in, like you asked, it's in John chapter 5, where this man who's been paralyzed for 38 years, and Jesus comes and he heals him. And one of the things I try and do in the book is show like Old Testament backdrops. Every chapter has an Old Testament backdrop that helps this New Testament scene in John pop. And so the scene for that one, when we hear he's been paralyzed, laying on the mat there for 38 years, is there anywhere else that number of 38 appears that you can think of? And actually, in Deuteronomy, we read it was 38 years that Israel was stuck in the wilderness under the curse of the law, unable to rise up and enter into God's promises, into the promised land. And I go into a lot more detail in the book, but in short, I suggest, and a lot of the early church readers saw in this man a picture of God's people, of Israel and of humanity, really stuck under the weight of the law and unable to rise up and enter into the promises of God for them. And Jesus steps in and says, hey, can I help you? Do you want to get well? Let me lift you up and bring you into that. And so I really saw in that scene, I saw myself in this man who was paralyzed kind of under the weight and the curse of the law, where I had, again, like months and months where it was hard for me to rise up and get up out of bed, even because I found myself asking, was I wrong or was I wronged? I'd gone through this kind of brutal season with our church dismantling and just all the stuff it was wrapped up in. And I found myself going, man, God, was I wrong? I would wake up at 3 a.m. every night for a year. And that was the question blazing through my mind, like replaying everything and trying to go, did I do something wrong? I could have done better. That would, or was I wronged? Was this other people acting wrongly and, and whatnot? And reality, like most of us, there's probably a mix of both. Like, there's probably some things I could have done better. And there's probably a lot of junk that was not necessarily mine to own. But what I found in this story was Jesus asking me, "Hey, Josh, you're living under the law right now." Like the very question you're asking, it's a law question. Like, was I wrong? Like I broke the law, or I made God mad, and God, you brought all this down on me, or was I wronged? Did someone else do it to me, and I need you to come vindicate, whatever. And he's like, dude, you're stuck under the weight of law right now. You're analyzing your situation and you're in paralysis right now just because of you're under the categories of law. But I'm breaking in, and my question is, are you going to live by law, or are you going to live by grace? That I've actually come to raise you, even if you did do some things wrong. I've come to bring my grace to cover it, and in those areas that you were wrong, like I'm coming to bring my grace to lift you up and heal you. And I remember at first glance reading that story and going, do you want to get well? Can I help you? Like, of course the guy's going to answer yes, you would think. But then in my own heart, I'm like recognizing the challenge of, oh, do I want to get well?
Mm.
I actually need to, Jesus, receive your offer of grace to lift me up and pull me out of these categories, these things that I'm stuck in right now, so that I can truly enter into the promises that are not based on my performance and whether I've been good enough and earned it or whatever, but based on your goodness for
Yeah.
me.
That's beautiful, man.
So good. I go to the place where the disciples are asking Jesus, is it the woman who's blind or the child who's blind or, is it her parents who
Mm.
sinned or am I remembering this passage right? All of a
It's the
sudden
son, I
I'm,
think. Yeah.
yeah. And they're like, who done it? Like
Yeah,
it
he
was her
did,
fault.
yeah.
And so again, Jesus in that point was like, no, this was to glorify God in the way of coming in with grace and healing. And so even in that moment, it's not about the law. It's not about who done it, me or them, but are you willing to receive the goodness of grace of me walking with you? And I watch what I'm going to do. But you got to get up. Like, do you want to be healed?
Man.
The participation in the goodness of what Jesus is offering us. So I love that.
You guys made me think about, when you were speaking, Josh, about Psalm 40 and about how he pulls us up out of the miry pit, like he does the pulling, like the grace in there. He comes onto our side in that way. But that made me just think about Psalm 40, loving that Psalm too, out of the miry pit, man. I felt that too. Couldn't get myself up if I tried, and yet receiving it. It's so as we have an audience of leaders in so many ways, we always talk about this to leaders. It is so much harder to receive than it is to give. Leaders love to be in a posture of the giving position in so many ways, but that's a clever place to hide even.
Yeah.
And in a discernment of motive to receive, it's such a vulnerable thing, but that makes us a better giver even, but
Yes.
receiving, there's such power in that, and God knew it in his design that we need to receive.
Yes.
Well, we come from a different posture, right? Of humility, of knowing what it's really like to to want to get out of bed and to feel persecuted in your own mind by who did it. Like, is it me or is it them? And I'm thinking about those that are reading my book, Church Hurts, and just that voice is so loud and it keeps us paralyzed. So talk a little bit more. I mean, you're remembering the aftermath of all of the chaos of what happened in the church blowing up. And I imagine all the stories that go with that, Josh, for you, and all those that you had shepherded for a while. And you speak specifically in your book about Shepherd King and how he comforts his believers. A lot of times we want to throw the church out and we want to throw Jesus and God and the Holy Spirit out the door. We don't want anything to do with this Shepherd King. But I'm curious to know how you stayed connected and how you found that Jesus was comforting you and even going to his word. I mean, the fruit of it is this book. But that was a hard moment to stay connected and not want to just say, I'm done with it all.
Definitely. Well, I love, as you mentioned, I love Jesus's discussion of himself as the good shepherd. This is in John
Mm,
chapter 10, and I think it speaks a lot for those who have been, to those who of us who've been, maybe if you've been wounded or hurt by church leaders, especially, because we hear the word shepherd, I think, and we tend to think of I don't know. I think of like this image in my head of someone who's carefree out in the fields with a bunch of sheep, no
mm,
responsibility, kind of, like they're kind of caring for the sheep, but they're on there. But actually, that was a term in the Bible for leadership, that shepherds were leaders. So it's used to refer to kings, royal authority. And I'd say if king was the title of their position they held, shepherd was the language used for the way that they were to carry that authority, right? That they were to
mm,
actually guide and care and lead and put the needs of the sheep before their own and whatnot. And so in the ancient Near East, the shepherd's staff was actually a symbol of royalty. It symbolized leadership, but it called leadership towards the purpose that it was designed to serve,
mm,
right? And so when Jesus refers to himself as the good shepherd, some of the language he uses and all, it echoes an Old Testament passage here, Ezekiel 34, where God is confronting the bad leadership of his
mm,
people. God is confronting those who have been leaders. They've been kings or rulers or those in authority over God's people, but they have not handled that authority well. So I actually just pulled up this passage from Ezekiel 34 where God confronts. And side note here before I read this is that the word shepherd too, the word pastor means shepherd. It's a translation of shepherd, right? So I believe the imagery here, when God is confronting bad shepherds, we could see this as well. Like, I'm a pastor. I love pastors. I know pastors get a bad rap, but there are times that pastors have wounded or mishandled their authority, or at times have patterns that have been abusive and just really damaging. And as I read this passage, I think for those who are listening, I think one of the things I find powerful is that God names what was done as wrong.
mm,
That he's not trying to cover up or protect the reputation, quote unquote, of his church. Like he
mm,
names what was done that is wrong and confronts and calls it out. So here in Ezekiel 34, God confronts these bad pastors or bad shepherds. He says, "You have not strengthened the weak or healed the sick or bound up the injured. You have not brought back the strays or searched for the lost. You have ruled them harshly and brutally. So they were scattered because there was no shepherd. And when they were scattered, they became food for all the wild animals." And so that's God calling out like bad leadership amongst his
mm,
people. But one of the things I love is that Jesus doesn't say, okay, therefore you don't need the church, you don't need the flock, you don't need leader. No, he calls us to himself as the good shepherd, and he calls him to, like, he's reassembling the flock, the shepherd, to shepherd them
mm,
well. And it goes on the passage to raise up good shepherds. And so this is in that Ezekiel 34 passage, God promises, he says, the day's coming when I myself will search for my sheep and look after them. That's what God is doing in Jesus. He's coming to search for his sheep and look after them. As a shepherd looks after the scattered flock when he is with them, so I will look after my sheep. I myself will tend my sheep and have them lie down, declares the sovereign Lord. I will search for the lost and bring back the strays. I will bind up the injured and strengthen the weak. I will shepherd the flock with justice.
mm,
I love that picture where Jesus, I found that in my own life and my own story a few years ago with my own deep kind of wounds and hurt from the church, and going like, I, I need to, a few things. One is I need to be able to name for myself and with those close to me and before God, I need to be able to name what was wrong, And I found the confidence going, sometimes I think people who've been wounded by the church, we feel a pressure to like, oh, well, don't talk about it or you're going to
mm,
mess up the reputation of God's people or his church or something, and God, I love how he takes the opposite approach. He goes, no, it's important that we name and identify areas that we've been wronged or things that have been wrong amongst his people. But Jesus also won't allow us to stay stuck in a cycle of cynicism, right? That he actually searches for the lost, the scattered, the bruised in order to care for and bring them back into the fold, and to actually, I believe Jesus cares about establishing healthy leadership for his people and actually
mm,
restoring us not through no community, but through healthy community. Like that's actually
Mm,
how, if you've been wounded in community, the healing you need is going to come through community as well.
That's right.
And one final image I'll just share here that I love is it's in Luke 15, where Jesus, another pastor, he describes himself as the shepherd who goes out for that one lost sheep. And what I love is when he finds the sheep, he doesn't give him a roadmap and kind of go, okay, here's the way to get back home to safety, to health, or whatever, like take a right at that river up there and a left at that rock, or, no, it says he joyfully threw the lamb over his shoulders and carried it home himself.
mm,
And I think that's a picture of, man, Jesus
mm.
delights not only to come and find you when you've been wounded by bad shepherds, he actually delights to throw you over his shoulders and carry you home himself, that he wants to
Yeah.
comfort and guide and care for you on the process and journey of healing as well.
I love that, Josh. You're speaking to so much. I'm just like, yes, yes, yes. So I'm
Yeah.
I'm going to ask one of my 50 questions I have for you. Um, so you're speaking to, like, again, the need when we're wounded in community, we need also to find a healthy community to heal. And yet I really do think there's permission to take our time because our trust meters are broken. We're not really sure who to trust and who's healthy and who's not healthy. Um, and so talk about that little small window of time that looks different in terms of how long for different people and different levels of hurt. But what does it look like to lean into Jesus as the shepherd and then to move into finding healthier shepherds? I want you to speak a little practical about that, maybe in your own story or as a pastor. What would you recommend for those in that place?
Great. No, definitely. Well, first off, just to affirm, what you're saying, even experientially, so my wife, Holly, for example, so we were part of, a evangelical church, and she could not step foot in an evangelical church for 6 months after everything, and she felt comfortable in high church spaces, so she could go there, and really, I think there was a sense of stability. There was no personality at the center. There was rhythm, history, tradition. Like the liturgy was very comforting, and there was a deep encounter with Jesus there. Um, and uh, and I. Yeah, I would kind of take our kids to with my mom when we moved back home for a season in an area that they felt kind of more natural for where they were at, and so I think, though, in terms of that process, it was interesting because in our story, we ended up, not only that, we ended up moving back home, but we kind of lost like all of our community relation where we'd been living for 5 years. And I remember feeling for a good 6 months to a year really isolated. There were some old long-term friends, but um, I know from my story, a few things that were helpful was, one, finding, man, who were those 2 to 3 top friends that I could really trust to just process everything. I could be raw, honest, and just work through it with. I got into counseling. I asked around and found a really good counselor to begin processing through everything with as well, and giving myself, I think for Holly and I, giving ourselves permission. I don't know if there's one set timeline for everyone, but giving ourselves permission to take some time. And we had about 6 months to a year of really working through the wreckage and the aftermath, and with a counselor, with some close, trusted community. And for my own sake too, there was help in trying to um, control the things that I could control, So, for example, watching my diet and exercise and things of that nature, not that it's, it's a quick fix that's going to fix everything, but trying to create a stable foundation of kind of caring for my physical health at a time where my mental health was struggling. I think that created some stability on a physical level for my mental health to grow as well. I love the story in Second Kings where Elijah is on the run and from Jezebel, and he's suicidal. He has these suicidal thoughts, and man, I just want to die. Kill me now. Like, I'm done. Like, and God comes to him, and even though his thinking is wrong, God doesn't start with his thinking, kind of his mental health. God starts with his physical health. He says, "Hey," the angel says, "Hey, take a nap." eat a meal, kind of has him rest, feeds him twice, goes that twice before bringing him then to, okay, now let's address, after that, God again begins addressing some of his spiritual and mental challenges. And so I don't know that I may have gone away from what you originally asked, but I think the heart of it was, yeah, giving yourself time and finding those close, trusted community friends. A good counselor can be a game changer, and um, in order to really process through everything, not
You're
in isolation.
you're
Yeah.
hitting it exactly. Yeah. I thank you for naming those things, and even the caring for the body first, sometimes before we can get to what's going on in the mind and even the soul wounds. Um, so
Yeah.
very, very practical. Thank you.
Yeah, when we go through things like that, it can be devastating. I mean, you add if you're outside of the church, not involved in church or Christianity, imagine having this extra layer placed upon you. And if you're in leadership in the vocational ministry, an extra layer is now like makes us representatives somehow of God's leadership. I mean, in that, as you read that passage from Ezekiel 34, that is a sobering warning. I remember feeling that and feel that. I kind of get in touch with that, to read that, to think. And even I was just processing with guys in my Bible study about this the other day. It's like asking myself that question, like, God, where am I in this passage? Where do you see me in this passage right now? I want to be where I want to be in reality. And I want to be with you in this. So speak to me. You and others, a few others, have permission to influence my life. And it's not about checking boxes, it's about relationship. And I love that. Also, to what you were saying, Josh, it made me think about just the tendency that we can have when we go through these really hard fractures that involve spiritual communities. Just there's oftentimes so much enmeshment that exists in dual relationships in that, and it's an untangling. It is so difficult, but we're vulnerable as we go through those types of things to either or thinking. And what I heard you just describe, and Tara's question also, is just, it's not either or thinking. It's not like, I'm done with the church, I'm done with relationships, because God loves us too much. We know that when we've been walking with him for a long time. And yet it takes time to get to that space where it's not just about head knowledge, but it's about, okay, I submit to community again, outside of this protected time and circle where you've allowed me to bring some healing in my life and teach me how to take the next steps, right? To not just sort of put myself back out there, but actually to have take all that you've done, grow from it, and step into to help the church, help community in the world be healthier.
Yeah.
And it's time, it's wisdom. There's safety in that. He doesn't just kind of kick us out, to just be exposed again in that way. So those are just some things that you made me think about as you shared.
Yeah. And something real quick before we move to the next question, Josh, is that you gave permission. You said it in a very simplistic way, but I want to draw it out, is that you and Holly had different places that you needed to be. And you also had these kids, right, who are still in their formation years so trying to hold all of that gets really hard. And so having people that you can be very raw with and name all of the hurts, and then allowing everybody in your family or in your close relationships having their own way of processing. And that gets hard. But looking back, you're like, yeah, we did that. We did that well.
Yes, totally. Yes. And I think, and this may be probably for everyone, but I wonder if particularly for leaders at times too, there can be a temptation or a danger of maybe an extra pressure to kind of perform, or like, let's say, okay, hey, we have
Yep.
to put on a good
Shoulder
face
the
or a good
load.
front or shoulder the load, that kind of,
Mhm.
and going, man, I think for for my wife and our kids, our approach that I'm so grateful was just like, no, raw honesty with one another, with our close friends, community. So for example, we have a teenage daughter, and Um, yeah, our other kids are younger, but she lost a lot too, with her friends and all that. And our philosophy kind of going into that was like she gets to know everything, like this impacted her tremendously. And so she gets to know all the details, all the ins and outs. We don't want this to be kind of some uh ambiguous. We're trying to protect other people's reputation, other thing. It's like, yeah, maybe in the broader public sphere, but she gets to know it all, and I think that was really helpful for her own journey with it, that mom and dad weren't trying kind of putting on a front to try and quote unquote protect the church, but like she actually got to know, dude, yeah, and life is messy and that's why we need grace. That's because we're all right. And so I think for her to see all that and to know with more in depth, it wasn't just this kind of ambiguous thing of like, oh, that was a hard season for mom and dad, but it was actually like, um, she could understand some specific ways that we were hurt and things that impact her, and yet to see us loving Jesus even more and pressing into life together and into the gospel even more. And my own sense is like that has ended up having a significant positive impact on her own well-being and spiritual journey with Christ as well.
I validate that. There's nothing more powerful than seeing mom and dad go through a valley and being honest about that and watching how they're clinging to Jesus through, and for her, especially in those teen years. So thank you for sharing that, Josh.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So you're so passionate about the word, and I love just the way that you're connecting even Old Testament to New Testament passages. That just, it brings a richness in your discovery that God is for us in this season, and really seeing how he comes to the other side. Speak about maybe another discovery that has just been so sticky for you and you can't help but share everywhere.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, there's so many. There were so many. One I love was so Jesus's restoration of Peter. That scene has really hit me. So it's in John chapter 21, where Peter, like Jesus is intentionally walking him back through his failures, like where Peter denied him at the going to the cross and all. And one of the things that's interesting to me is I believe Jesus intentionally sets the scene to walk Peter back into those things, right? And so um, we start with the fish. So Peter and the disciples, they're now out fishing. He's kind of gone back to fishing after Jesus died, and Jesus appears and says, "Hey, throw the nets on the other side." And and they do, and there's this miraculous catch, and he realizes it's Jesus. But one of the things that's happening here is Jesus is, I believe, he's intentionally echoing when he first called Peter, because that's the same kind of thing that happened. And you mentioned I'm kind of a Bible nerd. I love kind of these little things. So one of the things that hit me was there's this question of, John tells us there were 153 fish, and the nets were not broken. And you kind of go, why 153? Why every detail in John is
I don't
significant?
ask that question, Josh. I'm like,
No,
start
I do.
asking. I'm like, I don't even
As
think
a
about the
fisherman,
number.
I asked that question.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Okay, so why 150?
Why 153? And why are the nets not broken? Well, okay, a few thoughts. One is to understand, like when Jesus first calls Peter, the miraculous catch of fish, it's a sign of his calling to disciple the nations, to evangelize, to bring the gospel to the nations, right? He says, "Hey, now follow me and I'll make you a fisher of men." So this miraculous catch, it's a sign you're going to like bring in the nations into God's kingdom, right? Well, now he thinks he's botched that calling because of his failure, his mistake, and all that. And so Jesus is resetting that scene, I think, bringing him back into his calling. And what's interesting is in the first scene, when Jesus first calls Peter, we were told that there were so many fish that the nets were breaking and the boats were sinking. They couldn't hold it, right? And I think there's kind of this picture of like, yeah, when Jesus first called him, they weren't ready for the miraculous catch of the nations that was coming, like the ingathering of the nations that Peter was going to lead as an apostle. But when we get to the second one, there's a sense of like, hey, now you've been with me for a few years. Now I've gone to the cross and rose again. I'm giving you my spirit. Now you and the church are going to be ready for the ingathering of the nations that's coming, not because you didn't make any mistakes, but because of my calling, my presence with you and for you. I'm reestablishing your calling. And we see it, like Peter goes on from here and he leads at Pentecost and the nations come into the kingdom. And in the 153, there's one other spot that number appears in the Bible. It's in the Old Testament. It's in Chronicles. I can't remember the precise verse offhand, but it's the number of Gentiles. So people who are not Israelite, who are living in the land during the time of Solomon, where basically Solomon goes, hey, let's see how many of the ingathering of the nations have come into the people of God during my reign. And it's like 153,000. Like, and so I think Jesus is essentially with Peter going, hey, I'm bringing back the glory days, not because you were perfect, but through my presence, through my spirit, I'm a reestablish. Like you're calling to participate in my
Yeah.
kingdom. The
Amazing.
catch is going to be miraculous, and the nets won't break. The nets will hold because now the church is a mess, and there's a lot of mistakes, a lot of whatever, but also the church is been gifted with the Holy Spirit of God and His presence and His power to gather in. And when we're following Jesus rightly, to shepherd well and to see people restored and brought into the goodness and glory of God and His kingdom.
Oh, so good.
I'm going to find that 153 in Chronicles now. I'm going to go find it.
Well, and
I love it. Thanks, Josh.
It's just a reminder his story's not done.
Yeah.
And he knows what he's doing, and it's because of him that he'll finish what he started. And so, but doing the work still to do some healing along the way, so we don't continue on living in the shame of our past or the wounding that we've received from others. So, what a great picture! I love Peter. He's one of my favorites, and his yo-yo world of leadership. So,
well, we've got there's another famous story in Scripture in John 4, the woman at the well. And there's a deeper layer of meaning there against the Old Testament backdrop of the well as a place where the groom meets his bride. I mean, and so you being we love the word. We love being kind of nerds for the word, and it's so fun to find these little connections. Speak to us a little bit about the power of remembering that place where you first met Christ, where He found you, and how has that helped you heal and been a sign of commitment of His love for you. Just
Definitely
imagery.
Yeah, no, I love, my wife, Holly, and I, we first met at Old Laurelhurst Church on 32nd and Ankeny here in Portland, where our church met in that building way back in the day. And sometimes still I'll go walk by there and just, it's like the memory floods back, and that was where I ended up proposing as well. We kind of rented out the place and did a big thing in there. And there's something about going to that place where you first met. And I think that in John chapter 4, this famous scene with Jesus and the woman at the well, he's doing something similar. It's a picture, I believe, it's a real, one level, it's a real story, Jesus encountering this woman. But on another level, John narrates it in a way where I think we're intended to see ourselves in the story as a picture of Christ encountering the church as His bride. So as you were mentioning, the well has an Old Testament backdrop, and it's the place where the groom meets the bride. This is where in the Old Testament, where Isaac's bride, Rebecca, is discovered. It's where Jacob and Rachel first lock eyes in Genesis 29. It's where Moses meets Zipporah, rescues her at a well in Exodus 2. And there's a Jewish scholar, Robert Alter, kind of famous leading Old Testament scholar, and he talks about these 5 characteristics of this Old Testament type scene. And what's interesting is he says all 5 of these happen in John 4 with Jesus and the woman at the well too. Now, he's not a Christian, he's Jewish, but he's recognizing this pattern even in the New Testament as well. So he says in these scenes, 1, the future groom journeys to a foreign land. That's what happens here. Jesus comes from another place to Samaria. 2, there he encounters a girl at a well, like Jesus does here. 3, one of them draws water from the well. This whole discussion they have about water. 4, the girl rushes home with news of the stranger's arrival. And 5, a betrothal is concluded after he has been invited to a meal. So in that chapter, I kind of go through this whole thing, how we see each of these 5 elements really strongly here. But what's the point? Well, I believe the picture here is that it's not saying that there's something literally romantic happening between Jesus and this woman, but it's saying that John is narrating this as almost like a stained glass window or an icon, something that we would look through this scene or this story and see Christ encountering us as the church. And this woman is an amazing representative for the church. She's part Jew and part Gentile as a Samaritan, which is a major feature of the church in the New Testament. Um, she is from the wrong side of town, so to speak, Jesus, and yet Jesus crosses this amazing distance to go and to meet her and to encounter her. Like Jesus has crossed the greatest distance from heaven to earth to come be with us, even when others might say you're from the wrong side of town or whatever, like Jesus has come after us. So she's an amazing representative for us in our own story, who Jesus has crossed from heaven to earth to unite us in life with himself and with one another, uh, Jew and Gentile. And that we, like that woman, that we go back to town like, oh my gosh, come see the one I found who's told me everything I've ever done, who knows my life and who has invited me into union with him forever. Like that's the story of what Christ wants to do in your life, to bring you into the church that this woman represents, where his goal is not to use you, it's to love you. His goal is not to make you, I don't know, a worker to go get stuff done. His goal is, in essence, to make us as the church his bride. The goal is to be united with him in life forever. His commitment to us, his sacrificial love for us, that my sense for this woman is that she has likely been wounded in some prior relationships, like we're told she's had 5 other husbands and now she's with the 6th who's not her husband. And historically, some people have seen that as like, oh, she was kind of sleeping around or had this whatever past. But I think the reality I talk about in the book is like, in that day, um, this is more likely, I think the ancient audience would go, oh man, she's probably been really mistreated and experienced a lot of hurt. It was hard for a woman to divorce a man back then, not hard for the man to divorce the woman. There are a lot of contextual reasons why I think we should assume probably more like she's probably endured some real tragedy. Maybe some of these have died, mistreated, have left her. But now, what's interesting, she's been with these 6 prior men. And this happens a lot in John's gospel. There's 6 things leading up, and then Jesus shows up and he is the 7th, right? I believe Jesus is the 7th husband, that even if we've been mistreated and so on, like Jesus shows up and he's not out to get something from you. He's out to give himself to you and to commit to you and care for you and sacrificially serve you and restore you and build you up in life with him forever.
And isn't the number 7 kind of significant too throughout Scripture in many ways? I've heard that. I can't think of specific examples. Maybe you can, Josh. But that number is important, symbolic.
Definitely, yeah. So the number. So if you think about the 7 days of creation in Genesis 1, that in Genesis 1, there's this picture of 7 is in throughout the Bible, kind of this picture of completion or things being brought to completion or wholeness or fullness. We think of the 7 days of a week today, and one last little tidbit here, if I could share. This is earlier. Jesus' first sign is a wedding, and he turns water to wine, and he uses 6 water from 6 jars for washing as well. And I argue in the book, I talk about how I believe this is a picture where Jesus is the 7th vessel, the one who completes, because in the Old Testament, these ceremonial jars were used for cleansing, for purification, all that. But we're told when Jesus dies at the cross and the spear pierces his side, John tells us that out comes blood and water and blood. And the main imagery for Jesus' blood shed in the gospel is wine. And so I think we're given a picture where John is going, hey, and this ties into the woman at the well scene, right? Hey,
I love it.
My mind is going.
God's showing off, man. He's showing off.
I believe that John is going, hey, church, listen up. Like Jesus loves you so much. He's crossed from heaven and earth to be with you. And he is the one who's turned water. You don't get washed with water anymore. You get washed with wine. Like it's his blood shed for you. He's the 7th vessel who now through his blood shed wants to wash and cleanse and restore and pursue and make you whole and build you up. And it's why he went to the cross, was to lay down his life for his bride, to be sacrificially united with us forever.
Amen. So good,
Drop the mic,
Josh. And I
baby.
just love your innovative mind. You're like connecting things all over the place for,
So
I think,
Thank
with
you,
the
brother.
point of drawing us to the heart of God and our good shepherd and how he wants to love us like a good husband, not an abusive one, that I would be 100% in the same lane of recognizing that the woman at the well had experienced a lot of trauma.
Great trauma.
Yeah, great trauma. And Jesus is like the best trauma therapist ever. So, so as we wind down, I want to keep going, but our time is up, Josh. So before we close, leave our listeners with just one last word of encouragement. What's the Holy Spirit leading you to share? And then how do people find your book? God is on your side.
great. Maybe the last thing I'd share, there's a phrase that's coming to mind. It's from one of the final chapters in the book, and it's that dude, the hard place can become a holy place. Right, the hard place can become a holy place. That, and this scene here is John 20, where Mary Magdalene is going to the tomb where Jesus died, and we're not told that anyone else was going, but she was going to the hard place, the place where everything that she loved had been lost. And I can imagine for many listeners who have endured church hurt, like there's a sense of, man, this community that I loved, this life with Jesus that I knew with these others, that's been lost. There can be such a kind of a crater hole in that. And Mary goes to the tomb, and it's a painful place, but it's also the place where she becomes the first person to encounter Jesus in that particular crater, in that hole, in that tomb. And the detail that strikes me is that we're told that on the slab, kind of where his body had been laid, there was an angel at the head and an angel at the foot. And the Old Testament echo there is in the Holy of Holies, the holiest place, was the Ark of the Covenant with the angel at the head and the angel at the foot. And the picture is that now what was the hardest place has, through the power of Christ's death and resurrection, become a holy place where he encounters his people. He encounters Mary, and is able to bring healing, wholeness. And it doesn't mean that it wasn't hard. It doesn't mean, but it means that there is a presence there, that Christ can encounter you in a way that can, man, bring healing and wholeness and transformation in a way that, I found myself in my own life looking back after a year or so and going, God, I would not wish last year on my worst enemy, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. Like, if that's what you can do through it. And I don't want to say that as I couldn't have gotten there. It took over a year to get there, so that's not to kind of sugarcoat or say, hey, whatever, the goal is to get there really quick or maybe ever for some. But it is to say the reason I was able to say that is because, man, the hard place in my life became a holy place where Christ did show up in powerful, significant ways. And so I think the word of encouragement I would give is, especially for those right now who are on the front end, maybe it's the wounds are still fresh and there's the crater hole. And it can be hard to go to that place, whether through counseling or community or prayer, and to explore the wounds. But rather than ignoring them, having the courage, like Mary did, to go to the hard places. And I believe that in that work of going to the hard place, where what you loved was lost, and where the way that you knew Christ in that place before feels shattered, that Jesus can encounter you there, and that can actually become a holy place of encounter in life with him.
Thank you for bringing that hope and that truth. Know that it comes from a place of depth and street credibility, I like to say. Thank you, Josh. That really is going to help a lot of people as it touches us to hear you talk about it in this way. And we just thank you for your willingness to help translate this for people. And in the book, God is on your side. Tell folks where they can find more about you and about the book.
Thanks. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So I'm mostly on Instagram. I can't even remember my handle offhand. Josh Butler on Instagram. I'm out there somewhere. And I've got a website, joshuaryanbutler.com, just kind of my full name. And the book's available wherever books are sold. Would love if listeners want to be in touch. I'm pretty accessible online that way.
Love it. Well, thank you, Josh. Thank you for your time. Thanks for being obedient to put this book together and to share the vulnerability of your story in the context of also all the things that God's showing you in His Word. I'm loving it. So thank you. Thank you for this time.